Few people know the story of this man, Pharaoh Narmer. He was a great warrior and military leader, responsible for uniting two rival territories, thus creating the world's first major political state, Egypt. Due to this achievement, Narmer became the first pharaoh of Upper and Lower Egypt. But before delving into his story, understanding the real importance of Pharaoh Narmer is essential. It's important to grasp the setting in which Narmer emerged and to briefly summarize the geopolitics of ancient Egypt. During Narmer's time, around 3100 BCE, there were no pyramids or sphinxes. Instead, a wild and somewhat chaotic scene prevailed with numerous wars and conflicts among the settlements along the Nile riverbanks. These tribes were known as nomes, and life for them was a constant struggle for survival. Imagine a desert Wild West scenario, but instead of cowboys, there were small tribes and groups of monarchs, constantly engaged in battles and bloodshed. In this chaos, Egypt was essentially a lawless land, not the unified nation depicted in history books. It was divided between Upper Egypt, located further south along the Nile River, and Lower Egypt in the northern Nile Delta region. These two territories were not friendly neighbors. They were mortal rivals constantly at war. Upper Egypt, with its arid and mountainous lands, clashed against Lower Egypt, with its fertile plains and access to the Mediterranean. These two kingdoms had different customs, traditions, and even crowns. The rulers of the south wore tall white crowns known as the Red Crown, Hedjet, while those in the north wore shallow, red crowns called the Deshret. Historical evidence, such as various engravings on ceramics and depictions of leaders from each kingdom, always show two distinct entities with different sets of traditions. But then Narmer enters the scene and changes everything. Around 3100 BCE, this small monarch from Upper Egypt decides, enough of this division, let's create a unified Egypt. With a blend of strength, cunning, and innate strategic talent, Narmer achieved just that. He unified the two lands by merging their crowns, suddenly giving the world its first state by incorporating the fertile western region and triangular Nile Delta into his own kingdom, spanning the Nile Valley area in the south. Narmer created a united Egypt, giving rise to the world's first major state. This union marked not only the beginning of a political state, but also ground zero for a great cultural state that would change human history. From this unification, Egypt developed a unique visual style during the era of the pharaohs, whose influence resonated through the ages. The iconography, symbols, and writing adopted by leaders like Narmer and his successors became tools used by all pharaohs throughout history to convey power, strength, and unity for millennia. Despite Narmer's incredible historical significance, very little is known about him from historical records. The reading and meaning of his name remain uncertain, though it is known that his name is found throughout Egypt, indicating he may have been the first king to rule the entire region. Moreover, his name has been found outside Egypt, in the region now belonging to Syria and Palestine, suggesting Narmer also conducted business in those areas. Another significant piece of evidence of Narmer's greatness is the famous Narmer palette, a carved stone film depicting various scenes of war, victories, and mysterious symbols that still intrigue scholars today. Another important source of information about this king is the Palermo stone. a slab of black granite engraved with the names of Egypt's kings up to the 5th dynasty. In addition to records of kings, it includes details of annual floods, festivals, wars, and major constructions in Egypt. Unfortunately, only a few fragments of this stone have survived to this day, housed in Palermo, Cairo, and London. The part mentioning the first king of the 1st dynasty, Narmer, has been lost, along with that of his successor. Despite this lack of definitive evidence, historians believe Narmer was indeed the first king of Egypt, followed by Pharaoh Aha. The question of whether the first pharaoh was Narmer or Menes remains debated. Ancient Greeks referred to him as Menes, but there is no consensus that Menes and Narmer were the same person. The academic community is still divided on this issue. Greek historian Herodotus, who visited Egypt around 445 BCE, recorded the names of various Egyptian kings, including Menes, as the first of these kings. However, there is no mention of Narmer in his accounts, leading to the assumption that Narmer and Menes were one and the same person. The historian Flinders Petrie argued that Narmer and Menes were two distinct names for the same person, Narmer being his birth name, and Menes a title of honor. A Greek priest born in Egypt named Manetho wrote his history of Egypt in the 3rd century BCE, stating categorically that Menes was the first Egyptian pharaoh and the one responsible for Egypt's unification around 3100 BCE. Whether these two names refer to the same person or not, Narmer became a legendary figure in Egyptian history. So what did Narmer do to unify Egypt's territory? He was a highly skilled military leader. According to accounts from Herodotus and Manetho, Narmer was described as an experienced military commander loved by his soldiers. This explains how he achieved the feat of subduing the north and establishing his authority over the entire Nile Valley. Artifacts like the Narmer palette, a mace that doubled as a weapon, inscriptions, seals, and ivory tablets depict Narmer as a relentless warrior, engaged in action against his enemies. On the Narmer palette, we see him grasping an enemy by the hair while preparing to deliver a fatal blow with a mace. On the other side, prisoners are slain, and Narmer is depicted in a victory procession. According to Manetho, Narmer led his army across the border and achieved great glory, possibly extending his incursions into Palestine, as suggested by various palaces bearing his name found in southern Israel. But how did Pharaoh Narmer die? Ironically, he did not die in a major battle, but in a rather unusual battle. Pharaoh Narmer met his end when he encountered a giant wild creature from African territory, a hippopotamus. Depictions of Egyptian kings in battle with these great creatures were common and symbolized bravery and power. Although later pharaohs did not engage in these hunts, it is likely that the early kings needed to prove their worth through such activities, thus gaining the support and taxes of their subjects. Manetho's record of Narmer ends with the phrase, "He was taken by a hippopotamus and died," indicating that such a death was not considered shameful for a pharaoh. Despite his importance to Egypt, there are few records of Pharaoh Narmer. Perhaps because the Egyptians never documented their leader's achievements, it was only about 2,800 years later, during the Hellenistic period, that a Greek priest managed to research and record Narmer's life in more detail. Due to these historical records, Pharaoh Narmer has come to mark history as a leader who consolidated Egypt and influenced the reign of all pharaohs who followed him for many generations.